I would like to welcome Danny O'Toole from Mayo County Council. He is Head of Digital Transformation, and we're going to go through and run through a series of questions with him this morning. So, Danny, I'd like to welcome you this morning and thank you for giving us your valuable time.
Good morning. Good to meet you and happy to be here.
Yeah, excellent. So, Danny, just moving along, you might just give us a sense of, the organisation, in terms of geographies and, users, and what kind of are the imperatives from your perspective?
Okay, Mayo, as many people know, is a rural county, geographically dispersed, population of 130,000 people. Within Mayo County Council, we have a staff population of just under 1,300 people. We have a constant requirement to maintain high standards of service delivery across the county to the citizens and the communities that we serve.
Perfect. Yeah, thanks for that. So, Danny, obviously, in terms of, you would have gone through, an evaluation and those sorts of things. What would have led to Teams being your choice of platform?
I guess, I suppose if I take it back a step, our journey to this point began really in 2016, late 2016, when we took the decision to go to Office 365. And at the time, it was Skype for Business. Obviously, it came before Microsoft Teams. We looked at the technologies that was out there. We looked at what was best fitting our organizational needs, and we looked at the whole business IT alignment. We put together a reasonably strong business case, and we put it to our senior management team at the time. Our infrastructure prior to that was quite ad hoc and thrown together, if you like, particularly in the telephony side. We had a number of ad hoc systems. There were 7 in total, I think, around the county in our regional offices. And we took the decision maybe to consolidate all of them because there was a high cost overhead on those at the time, and they were end of life in some cases. And we put the business case together, as I said, to the management team at the time. And to be fair, it was well received, and the benefits were sawn from an early stage. And we're fortunate, I guess, that we have buy-in to the likes of this journey that we began from the top down. We've had that buy-in continuously ever since, and I suppose that has stood us well in being well regarded as an innovative and forward-thinking local authority.
Yeah, absolutely. So, you've touched on some really interesting points there in terms of the consolidation and reduction of cost, and you spoke about it. We would tend to agree it's a journey. And where would you see that you are within that journey now, Danny?
We have a strong level of maturity. Obviously, our journey, as I said, started in 2016. We've moved to the Microsoft stack, obviously. Digital first, cloud first approach to everything we do since that journey began. And we've a strong level of maturity in the various stacks, the various aspects of the Microsoft stack, both in SharePoint, Dynamics, obviously in Teams. We're very much along the way, and due to the current climate as well, that maturity escalated quickly in the early stages of this year. But yeah, we're well established. I cannot say we're there yet, but we're well along the road. The levels of maturity in each of the areas are very strong, and we're building all the time and moving with the technology as it moves.
So one of the interesting, aspects that everybody kind of wants to know, and I think is difficult to measure, is total cost of ownership, or indeed return on investment. Would you be in a position to give us, and we're certainly not talking about monetary amounts, but even percentages, and even to talk to maybe a little bit of productivity and those sorts of tenets?
A difficult one to, and probably a bit early for us yet to project how far along that road we are in terms of return on the investment, but it's evident to see, outside of the monetary side of it, it's evident to see that productivity has definitely gone up in the use of the technology and the use of particularly the collaborative technologies like Teams. Previously it was Microsoft of Skype for Business, and now obviously Teams has taken over from that, and we have our entire staff population on Microsoft Teams now at the moment, and most definitely productivity has gone up because of that centralized collaboration and the ability to, simple things like work on documents together, co-editing, stuff like that. It's been such a giant leap for some departments in terms of consolidating their information into one space and getting the benefit from the technology, both from a collaboration and editing perspective.
Yeah. And tell me, look, highly topical, and it's hard to get away from calls without mentioning COVID these days. But has COVID affected how you run, and how maybe has Teams been assistive then in terms of how you've approached that?
It most definitely has. COVID obviously has dramatically affected everything we do, and we're now we have entered now a new normal, but technology for us, and particularly Microsoft Teams, has enabled us, I suppose, initially to go into a remote working capacity, because that was obviously, remote working is something we as a local authority would have never considered. That was something the Microsofts of this world did, and the tech companies around Ireland and the world. So we quickly revved up the engines in the first 2 or 3 weeks of COVID lockdown, escalated a Microsoft Teams rollout that was planned for 6 months into 3 weeks, as many companies will attest to. And that has been a fundamental part of the benefit of remote working and getting people to the same levels of productivity, and even higher than they were previously used to in the office environment. One of the big things that happened on the back of the first week of lockdown was the introduction of obviously we as a local authority have a responsibility to the people that are most vulnerable in our communities and the citizens out there that we serve. We had to set up a COVID response team. In addition to that, we set up a COVID hotline that was built exclusively on Microsoft Teams, and that was spun up over a weekend very quickly, very efficiently, and very well received by the management team.
Yeah, so I suppose agility then being a key tenet then of what you were able to do in that response. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, exactly. It was pivotal in the response to the pandemic. Obviously, we had a duty of care, as I said, to the people that we serve and the communities we serve, and there was a lot of uncertainty out there for everybody, both us and the communities. But I think when people got reassured that there was someone there to ask a question of, or get information from, or how do I get my groceries, or how do I get my prescription, particularly those, like we are, as I said earlier, we are a rural county. We have a lot of people living rurally and maybe on their own in some cases, and that brought a high level of reassurance that we were there on the end of the phone or the end of an email to give them the information they were looking for in uncertain times.
Yeah. So Danny, look, you mentioned, certainly Mayo County Council, an exemplary example of, digitization and the digital journey. In terms of the wider public sector or local authority, would you have any advice that you would impart in embarking on, taking on something like Teams? Are there any sort of key pieces that you might impart to people?
I think with projects like this and in the early stages, there's always lessons you learn and maybe pitfalls as well from the journey you undertake, particularly if you're one of the first, like we were, down the track on this. I definitely, the moving to the cloud environment is not as daunting as it may seem, and local authorities by their nature are slow enough in the past to move to new technologies, and we were no different to anyone else before we moved to Office 365. And paper in large organizations like ours move slowly, and we are very paper heavy, and that's part of my role, to try and remove the paper and the process intensive work that's going on at the moment. But I would just say they don't, and I've given this advice to many local authorities already in our collaboration groups. I would just say, don't be afraid to take the leap. there is concerns, and you can mitigate against those concerns, particularly around security and platforms and networks and stuff like that. They're all valid concerns, but you can mitigate against those, and it's not as daunting as it may first seem. You will have the cultural challenges around adopting new technologies, but there's lots of ways to break that down and meet those challenges around training and various aspects of internal culture within the organization.
So, Danny, an important question that's coming up this morning, you know, against the backdrop of COVID, and that is, you know, are Mayo for Sam?
I guess as an avid Mayo supporter for many years and been involved in football myself, you know what? You never know. It's obviously a different climate now we're living in, and I for one am glad to see football still continuing, because it gives us something to look forward to, I guess, even though we can't be in the stands shouting on the teams and that. But you know what? It's a knockout. It's back to the way it used to be in the pre backdoor system, and it's just, you know, performance on the day. You just never know. It'll be very hard to hold us back if we do win it in terms of joining into some kind of celebrations. Let's hope we're free from lockdowns by the time we do win it, and we'll celebrate it.
Well, that's for sure. And as an avid Dub, we wish you the very best of luck, Danny.
Thank you. I take that as a compliment from a 5 in a row follower.
Danny, I'd like to, you know, thank you for your time this morning and for imparting that. I think it'll be very useful to other organisations, you know, in terms of embarking on their journeys.
You're very welcome, and it goes without saying, if any organisations want to reach out to us and, you know, get a grasp or a handle on what lessons we learned along the way, we're more than happy to impart that information.
Fantastic. Thanks a million.